Hi, I'm Tim Donner along with Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Claude. And this is the Conservative Five, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. Justin Trudeau stepped down as Prime Minister of Canada because he was polling in the basement. It was a good outlook for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives forming a majority government. However, President Donald Trump trying to make Canada the 51st state and the Grits choosing a new leader dashed the prospects of a Tory comeback and resurrected the Liberal Party. The way Canada's going, becoming the 51st state of the U.S. might just be the ticket. So, Andrew, what's with the flip-flopping folks up in your part of the world in Canada? Do they have a hotline to the Democratic National Committee on what not to do?
Well, I think it's exactly as you stated in your opening. You know, the Canadians were so fed up with the former prime minister that the inflation was high, the cost of living is out of control, housing affordability, healthcare is in shambles. All these different aspects contributed to Trudeau's downfall. Pierre Poilievre, he had as much as a 25-point lead before Christmas. And then all these culminating factors happened. You had not only Justin Trudeau step down, you also have Trump declaring a 51st state for Canada. That was a downfall of the Conservatives, mainly because Pierre Poilievre, he was quiet pretty much the entire time. It took him weeks to respond to what Trump was saying. However, the Liberals, they made that as a central focus of their campaign. Trudeau, he was on camera crying about the tariffs, and then all the Liberal Party members are saying we're gonna be strong, we're gonna be fierce, we're gonna retaliate, and that coalesced a lot of Canadians. And if you look at some of the polling data, that was a top issue for a lot of voters. That if they don't like Donald Trump, they're scared of Donald Trump. But for some reason, Canadians tend to think that Mark Carney is somehow going to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. There was a recent report, I'll mention this quickly. I talked about on LN Radio with Mark Angelides, and it said that Carney had a phone call with Donald Trump, and he threatened Donald Trump by saying Canada will dump its U.S. holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds. Now, just a Liberal estimate, it will be about $100 billion. $100 billion out of a $17 trillion Treasury liquidity market. That's nothing. If I'm Donald Trump, I'm laughing at that, and I'm saying, you know what? Let's just raise your tariffs out of 50%. So at Carney, it's gonna be done. It's Trudeau 2.0, but the guy's smarter than Trudeau. So I guess that's the improvement that a lot of Canadians will have over the next few years.
So, Dave, it looks like the Grits have just enough for a minority government, forcing Carney to extend his hand across the table and form a coalition government with the Bloc, New Democrats, Green, the Bloc being the Bloc Québécois. What to make of the fact that the Grits did win the election, but they didn't achieve a majority?
Well, Carney has a challenge. I mean, a minority party cannot pass legislation or budgets without the support from the opposition parties. You know, for example, Bloc Québécois is expected to have 23 seats, or the New Democratic Party will have between 7 and 10 seats, and that's down from the low 20s. And you can probably count out the Conservatives that hold about 144 to 145 seats. Now, you know, while Carney, you know, may have had this miraculous comeback running on an anti-Trump platform, you know, it's going to have to come up with some more universally appealing solutions, I think, to Canada's problems. And they're going to have to be more than I don't like Donald Trump and his tariffs. The fact is that, you know, the issues Canadians care about are like the ones we care about, crime and housing. And that took a back seat to his peak with Trump during his campaign. If Carney cannot garner solid support from a fractured government, worst case, he would see a no-confidence vote, which would prompt another election in 1 or 2 years. So his challenge will be constantly facing the hard negotiations with opposition parties. Consequently, his government will risk the persistent perception, I believe, of instability and unable to find solutions to get, you know, the opposition parties' agreement on to solve Canada's domestic problems. He faces a perpetual parliamentary gridlock. If you look back at history, Canadian minority governments have had short lives, and Carney's going to have to come up with some solid alliances, or his government will be just another statistic.
Well, that's the difference between parliamentary government and pure democracy or constitutional republic like the United States, is that you have to form coalitions. Donald Trump doesn't have to do anything with the Democrats if he doesn't want to. If he wins the popular vote, or he wins the electoral vote, I should say, then he's got the office, period. And then he has to deal with a Congress that may or may not be in his favor. Of course, right now it is. So, Graham, in the late stages of the Canadian election campaign, we saw an image of a retired Liberal supporter in Ontario going viral. The picture showed the individual attending a Carney rally and flipping the double bird, or shall we say the double salute, double middle finger salute. So what's up with that guy? Where does he go?
Well, I guess, Tim, if he's got any sense by now, he's already planning to move to a little place in Canada called Alert, which I'm sure Andrew's heard of it. It's actually, as far as I know, the northernmost inhabited place on the planet. It's up there in the province of Nunavut, if I'm pronouncing that.
It's not a province, Graham. It's a territory.
Oh, it's a territory. Okay. All right, then. Well, anyway, that's where it is, Alert. So he should be on his way there by now, because probably for about half of the population of Canada, he's now pretty much public enemy number one. I think the perfect caption for that photograph would have been, "Let them eat cake," because that was exactly the attitude of that gentleman, I guess. And it seems to be kind of a good metaphor for the attitude of the entire establishment in the US, in Canada, in Europe, or at least the western part of Europe. This attitude that we're going to maintain the status quo. We've got what we want, kind of a family-friendly show, so I won't use the word, but basically F the rest of you, because we don't care. We're going to do things our way. Can't afford housing, struggling to pay your bills or feed your children. We don't care. If you're complaining about that, that makes you an inconvenience at best and an enemy of the state at worst. And you need to keep quiet and do what we tell you. And that one photograph of that gentleman really summed up that whole attitude. And particularly in Canada, the younger generations are upset because of the generation this guy falls into, which is obviously he's a baby boomer. And the younger people are thinking, you see, these people are already established. They've got their lives worked out. They've got their houses. They've got everything, running smoothly. And they don't care about our future, in which we are going to be struggling. So I think, personally, I believe that gentleman and his photograph are not going to be soon forgotten and may figure into Canadian politics for possibly at least a couple of years to come or longer. I think that's an image for the ages, really, and not in a good way.
So, Graham, I assume when you said F the rest of you, you meant friend the rest of you, right? The social media term to friend the rest of you. I'll just assume that as we carry on here. Yeah. All right, Mr. John Clore, let me ask you this. How much did Trump derangement syndrome play into this election when it came right down to it?
Well, I think Mr. Moran did a great article on this at Liberty Nation. Canadians give the Liberals another government, in which he looked at the polling data, which suggested that the baby boomers were very much influenced by the anti-Trump rhetoric and the double finger. But for younger Canadians, for Gen Zs, they're more concerned about inflation and the economy, as many of our panel have discussed today. And that's what is intriguing to me about Canada and about its parallels to the United States, which is that, giving people the finger is not really a policy proposal, but it's not going to fix the problems. We see demographic shifts going on in the young in both countries. I don't think this is going to be Trudeau's government, because he will need the Quebec bloc or Bloc Québécois or or others. And actually, anecdotally, when we were shearing sheep this week, our shearer had just come back from Canada, and she's a liberal. And she asked me, she said, what do you think about Canada becoming the 51st state? She said, I was very surprised how many people in Quebec were positive about the idea. And she's no conservative, and she was very inquisitive about this. And so I'm not sure I agree that long term, that may have been a backfire for them.
Francois Blanchet, he's the leader of the Bloc Québécois, and he had a news conference days before the election day, and he mirrored what Donald Trump was saying. How Donald Trump once said that it's just an artificial line between Canada and the United States that was established many years ago. And Blanchet said the other day that, Canada is just an artificial country. There's nothing real about it. Of course, that pandering to the whole separatist movement of the Bloc Québécois. So that's to be a stark contrast between the Bloc and the ruling Liberals over the coming years, because that's the opinion of a lot of Quebec voters. To piggyback to what you're saying, John.
So 3 leaders, 3 elections, 3 losses. That's the Tories' record over the last decade. But the difference this time, however, is that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives fumbled the ball, or in Canada, you might say the puck, after ordering new drapes for 11 Sussex Drive, the Canadian equivalent of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Thank you, panel. So that's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Now, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Tim Donner, filling in for Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech, libertynation.com.